In the next project, we switch gears once again just to illustrate how varied this field of sustainability management is. You'll hear about Staten Island, a former landfill, and a new park. All that from Pamela Quinlan.
Good evening. I'm Pamela Quinlan, and on behalf of my team listed above and of our advisor, Luis Rosen, I'm excited to present to you the communication strategy for Freshkills Park. I'll be introducing the project, talking about our methodology, and our overall recommendation to the client. Our client's the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, specifically Eloise Hirsch, who is a Freshkills Park administrator. Our project is to develop a communication strategy that addresses public health concerns raised by Staten Island residents in a 2010 survey conducted by the New York City Parks Department. In 1948, the Freshkill landfill opened on the west shore of Staten Island. By the late 1980s, it was receiving 29,000 tons of New York City trash per day. And in 2001, the landfill was finally closed. At that point, there were 4 mounds on site. They're up to 250 feet high, containing overall 150 million tons of solid waste. In terms of giving you some sense of the scale of that, the footprint would cover Manhattan from 26th Street down to the Battery. Right now, that landfill is being converted to a park in phases that will complete in 2036. But the challenge for Freshkills is to have people come to the park and think of it as a safe place to be, considering that it was a landfill and they're worried about their health. One respondent captured that well. Whenever I opened up my eyes, opened my windows, the smell would come into the house. 3 years later, I got breast cancer. That's what I think it was from. So they need to address those concerns to be able to ensure that people actually come to the park. So how are they communicating today? Currently, Freshkills has a website, a blog, they're using social media. When we completed the full SWOT analysis of their communications, we found that although they have a web presence, it's not very current. They are engaging with the community, but they're doing it in a very reactionary way. They're only reaching about 5,000 people in total, and most importantly, they're not addressing health. So there's an opportunity here to prioritize how they talk to the community and to really tackle the health issues that Staten Islanders are facing. The main threat for them is that there's an ongoing existing dialogue about Freshkills that's negative, and they're going to have to change that. So the methodology we used, we took the survey data we had, we analyzed it to understand the concerns, did scientific research to understand the validity of those health concerns, and looked into the best way in which to communicate that to Staten Island residents. So the survey we received wasn't the actual survey itself or the multiple choice answers, but the answers to one specific question. Explain why you would or would not be interested in visiting Freshkills Park. And that's what they said. This is a visual representation of all of the answers to that question. The bigger the word, the more frequently it came up. Using best practices in social science research, we were able to analyze this data and quantify it and found that most people on Staten Island said they would visit the park. About 3/4 of them said they'd go, but that's not the full picture because health concerns were raised across all categories. In diving into the demographic data, we found that younger people thought of the Freshkills Park as a way to spend time with their families, and older people saw it as an asset for Staten Island. But regardless of the age, all age categories raised health concerns. So how to validate those concerns? We did scientific research and found that there's 4 pathways in which toxins can be released from a landfill and come in contact with humans. Landfill gas into the air, and then leachate that can travel into the surface water, the soil, and the groundwater. In a 2002 study of over 100 landfills worldwide, here are the associated main chemicals that were released and the health concerns that could be resulted from exposure. So how Freshkills is actually managing this is really related to their infrastructure. And primarily, this work here, this line here is, I don't know if you guys can hear me now, that line there is the impermeable plastic liner. It's about a foot thick of plastic that's protecting people from the toxins and the garbage below. And below that drainage layer is the gas vent layer, and that allows the actual landfill gas to be captured and funneled into the gas management system. Below that's the soil barrier, and that really is protecting the impermeable plastic layer from the actual garbage to minimize contact. Above the plastic layer is additional barrier protection material, about 2 to 6 feet, which the human activity is above that, so it protects the plastic liner from the human activity on the park. So looking at Freshkills and the risk there. For soil, the risk is very low. As we just went through, people are walking around. They're not very close to the actual toxins in the garbage because of the infrastructure. The same thing with the air. The landfill gas management system and the monitoring gives assurance that the air is safe. The groundwater is a different story. Because Freshkills was built in the late 1940s, there's no liner below the landfill, so we know that there's contaminants getting into the groundwater. There are walls underground, 65 feet worth of walls that are actually moving the leachate into collection pools, but that's not quite enough, and it is contaminating the groundwater. The main mitigation measure is that the groundwater isn't really used in Staten Island. It's illegal to extract it, and the drinking water comes from the Catskills. So overall, the risk for human health is still low. Surface water is the main risk at Freshkills. This is contaminated both by Freshkills landfill and other point source pollutions in the area. Our team actually looked at the monitoring data of the water itself and found that there were areas that exceeded New York State environmental standards. However, with proper management of the surface water and the sediment below that, you can minimize this risk so that it would actually require a small child to consume 45 liters per day to actually experience adverse health impacts. So how do you communicate this? What we found from our best practices in risk mitigation, image repair, and communication strategy is that the risks that people perceive are really related to the hazard itself plus the outrage. So far, what we've talked about is how Freshkills is managing that hazard, and the communication strategy is how they manage the outrage. So what Freshkills needs to do is validate public skepticism. And you can do that through education and transparency about what's happening, ideally with one-on-one conversations where the conversations are targeted to the audience, and to make the media a partner in this discussion. So taking our findings from the survey, the research, and communication, we have a recommendation for Freshkills. First, who they should reach. The objective of the communication strategy is to address the health concerns of Staten Island residents. So ideally, you would reach everybody on Staten Island. The best way to do that is to find touch points that can actually disseminate information down. So using demographic information, membership information, and interviews in Staten Island, we identified these 8 groups that are going to best be able to allow Freshkills to reach everybody on Staten Island. But how do you prioritize them? So the influencers are the most important people that Freshkills needs to contact first. They are the ones that are currently influencing the dialogue about Freshkills, and they have an ability to contact more than 10,000 people. So that includes the College of Staten Island, the politicians on Staten Island, some of the major big family groups, and also the media like Staten Island Advance and New York One. Once you get the influencer buy-in, you move into the early adopters. And those are some more of the trusted members of society there that can actually reach about 1,000 people. Once you get to the early influencers and early adopters, that information will trickle down to everybody else. So what are they going to say? We're providing the client with talking points that they can customize for medium and audience. But generally, they need to acknowledge public skepticism. This was a landfill. It's scary. But Freshkills takes public health seriously, that they are devoted the time, money, and top minds to ensure that the park is safe. And as a result, they have the most advanced engineering systems and sustainable technology in the world. There's a history of landfill to park conversions. They've been doing this since the 1970s, and the Freshkills is the largest to date. The park is committed to transparency. The robust community engagement will allow the public to learn and see for themselves that Freshkills is a safe place to be. And finally, Freshkills is a demonstration site, which will be a model for land reclamation projects around the world. So how do you reach them? Recommend that Freshkills establish a community advisory board with an environmental health subcommittee. They hold information sessions, and they have face-to-face meetings whenever possible. Engage the media. Build relationships with those who are reporting about Freshkills today to influence that dialogue. Have information ready for them through a press kit, and be prepared in case something happens so that you can respond to a crisis immediately and get out there with a message. Finally, web tactics. Web tactics will serve as a supporting function to both community and media engagement and actually allow a back and forth dialogue with the community. So that needs to be kept current. It needs to incorporate the health information with the fact sheets that we're providing to the client. And they should look for search engine optimization best practices to incorporate so when people get online and look for information about Freshkills, they get driven to the Freshkills website. The messaging does need to be customized based on who you're talking to. When talking to technical, such as doctors or environmental health professionals, Freshkills should deliver this information and say it's safe, but back that up with the rigorous analytical data. But when you're talking to families, Freshkills should say, here's why the park is safe. Here's infrastructure we have that protects your children when they are hiking or playing or running around in the park. So when do they reach them? We're recommending a 3-phase rollout. The first one's a testing ground. Build that community advisory board that targets those top of that pyramid, those influencers. Test your messaging with them that we're providing to see and make any changes that are necessary, and post health information on the web. After 6 months of phase 1, move into the full rollout, where you're now moving down that pyramid into the early adopters. The Freshkills staff can travel around Staten Island, talk about the park, and highlight health concerns, and develop a crisis communications plan so they're prepared if something happens. Last, to integrate the web efforts so that they can have things current and up to date. Finally, after a full year, Freshkills should reassess. Where do they stand now? Redistribute that exact same survey that they put out in 2010 to see, is this working? Are their concerns alleviated? And test specifically against the community segmentation and the customized messages. Because overall, they need to make sure that Freshkills is communicating in a way that is responsive and reassuring to Staten Islanders' health concerns related to Freshkills Park. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Did they communicate with the community, or did you tell them to, or was there anything out?
So as we haven't actually delivered this to them yet, we certainly didn't call them up and said, here's what we think you should do. But I think what that did was really highlight the fact that that idea of a crisis communication plan is super critical, because there was a vacuum, at least for a full day, where nobody released any information. And when it was released, it didn't tackle health concerns. I mean, we know from the fact that what's good is the landfill gas management system is working because the place didn't blow up. But generally, the information is that the information shows that what actually happened, it was on one of the mounds that wasn't fully capped yet. And that could be communicated to the public to make them feel like, when this is converted to a park and it's done, it will be safe. So that really highlights that it wasn't really addressed. Health concerns were not addressed, and it took them a while to respond at all. So that highlights the need for a communication strategy, I think.
I'm a little confused by the timing that you suggest. So you suggest messaging already today that the park won't be complete until many years from now?
Sure. So the park won't be fully complete until 2036, but it's going through phases of opening. There's actually parts of it that are opening this year, but not exactly where the garbage was. So there's these 4 mounds, I don't have a picture to show you, but there's 4 mounds of it, and the areas outside of it are opening sooner. There's a park called Schmuel Park that's opening this year. But in terms of their overall plan of how they're doing this, they still need to have the community involved in supporting it. And it will take time to address these health concerns and really reach out to them. So to make sure this project continues to open and has public support, we think that addressing health concerns now is really critical. Yes?
Why didn't your client consider changing the name of the park?
It's an interesting question. I think part of it, and we kind of spoke to the client a bit about that, and when you think of this as a model for land reclamation, I think they don't want to pretend this wasn't a landfill. It's what can we do? The fact that we all make so much waste, and we have to have some kind of solution of how to deal with that going forward into the future. And what Freshkills can do, rather than saying that, oh, we're going to pretend this is just a park and was never a landfill, it really celebrates the fact that the top sustainable technology and engineering there to really convert it. So I haven't gotten an exactly clear answer from them on it, but that seems to be at least my takeaway of why they wanted to keep the name.
In Spain and in Europe, there is like a long history of landfill to park conversion. Did you look at those places in Spain to see how they did the communication plan?
So we actually looked at a bunch of different case studies, looking at different landfill to park conversion projects. We tried to find ones that were most similar in scale and that were most comparable to Freshkills to see what we can learn from them. Unfortunately, they're not a single one of the landfills that we looked at that were converted to a park actually had a communication strategy that geared at educating the public ahead of time. So the good learning from it was that if it's done well and you have a park open, people are really responsive and they're going to come. But in terms of really understanding how best to educate the public, we did look at other sites from ones in the United States and also ones like in Korea, but we did not find any one that we could actually take a lesson learned about communication strategy.
We have time for one more question.
Yes.
In relation to the quote about the woman who complained about the smell coming into her house, what I know of Staten Island, it's a fairly conservative community and also well established. There seems to me that a lot of the Staten Island community, a lot of the residents have been there quite a long time. And so the result of that is you're working against a kind of political barrier and a social barrier as well, that it's probably the most conservative of the city boroughs politically, and the ones that are the residents who are most it's hardest to convince of things. When you're working against a woman who said she's convinced she got breast cancer from the landfill, that's a pretty tough task to overcome or to deal with.
And I think that's true. And what you said, your characterization of Staten Island is actually quite consistent with our findings and demographic information. And what that really highlights, again, is why, in terms of best practices of communication, it's why the community outreach is so critical, because you can't just put out a flyer and expect people to listen and care. Like, the Freshkills staff needs to engage with the public really one-to-one and really educate them and let them know what's happening with it. And I think it's going to, and that's one of the reasons why they have to start this so early, is because it's going to take time. There is a lot of skepticism. There's been a lot of opposition to the landfill from the beginning, and there is this, ongoing dialogue about Freshkills that has a lot of scare tactics in terms of health. So,
Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you.